She had never known a man's touch until she locked eyes with a millionaire. That night, he took her innocence and left the young virgin pregnant. If this story got you hooked, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. The fog covered the skyscrapers of New York when Emma Mitchell stepped off the bus at Grand Central Station, carrying a worn suitcase and dreams bigger than her own courage. Coming from a small town in rural Virginia, where time dragged between church processions and whispered conversations on sidewalks, she brought much more than a technical diploma in executive secretarial work. She carried on her shoulders the weight of being the only surviving child of a family marked by tragedy. The taxi cut through the still sleeping city, while Emma observed through the fogged window the first signs of life in the metropolis. Her heart beat erratically as she thought about the interview she would have in less than 2 hours. The opportunity to work as an administrative assistant at the Thompson Industries Group, one of the largest business conglomerates in the country, seemed more like a dream than reality. The company was known for ventures ranging from high-end real estate developments to award-winning wineries in Napa Valley. In the reception area of the imposing building on Fifth Avenue, Emma nervously adjusted the only blazer she owned, purchased on clearance. The reflection in the elevator mirror showed a 24-year-old young woman with delicate features, almost antiquated in their simplicity. Her long brown hair was tied in a discreet bun, and her eyes, a deep green inherited from her mother, carried that unique mixture of determination and melancholy. Since losing her younger brother Michael, who drowned during a school trip when he was only 12, Emma had learned to cultivate silence as an art. Her parents, destroyed by the loss of their youngest child, had become shadows of their former selves. Her father, once a respected teacher at the town's only school, retired prematurely. Her mother took refuge in endless prayers, as if she could negotiate with God for her son's return. Emma grew up in this environment of perpetual mourning, learning to stifle her own dreams so as not to cause more pain to those who already suffered so much. The 18th floor of the building was a world apart. Black marble floors reflected the sky through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the silence was broken only by the soft clicking of expensive heels against the polished floor. An impeccably dressed receptionist led Emma to a meeting room with a view of the city. "Mrs. Rebecca Thompson will be with you in a few minutes," she informed with a professional smile. Emma hadn't expected to be interviewed by the group's HR director herself, much less by someone who carried the family surname. Rebecca Thompson entered the room like a blast of icy wind. Tall, thin, with grey hair cut in a precise bob and discreet but visibly expensive jewelry. Her blue eyes scanned Emma from head to toe in a fraction of a second. "So you're the candidate from Virginia," said Rebecca, her voice as sharp as her features. "Your academic record is impressive for someone coming from such a modest university." The comment made Emma straighten her posture. Years of being first in all subjects, voluntary tutoring, and an award-winning final project would not be diminished by geographical prejudices. "I had excellent professors, and always knew I would need to work twice as hard for not having a known name backing my diploma," Emma responded, surprising herself with her own firmness. Something in Rebecca's gaze changed, perhaps interest, perhaps challenge. The interview continued for almost 2 hours. Technical questions, hypothetical cases, tests in English and French, languages Emma had obsessively studied through free videos and apps. When Rebecca finally put down her pen, her countenance was different. "You have something rare, girl, a kind of integrity that isn't learned in expensive MBAs." That's how Emma got the position of executive assistant to the presidency of the Thompson Group. What she didn't know as she signed the stack of documents and confidentiality agreements was that her fate was being sealed in a way that would change her life forever. Ryan Thompson returned from a trip to California 3 days after Emma started. She first saw him through the reflection in the mirrored windows. Tall, with a swimmer's build and the kind of presence that made the air seem thicker. At 38, he was considered one of the country's most brilliant and relentless executives. The main heir to the empire built by his father, he had multiplied the family's wealth through aggressive acquisitions and an almost prophetic vision for business. But it wasn't his fortune or power that made him a constant topic in New York's social circles. It was his aura of mystery, the carefully hushed family tragedies, the relationships that never lasted more than a few months. There was talk about the mysterious death of his father in a helicopter accident, about his mother who lived as a recluse in a mansion in Westchester, surrounded by nurses and medications, and mainly about his Italian ex-wife, who had mysteriously disappeared after a turbulent divorce, taking with her secrets that the Thompson family preferred to keep buried. The first meeting between Emma and Ryan happened on a rainy Monday. She was organizing the week's schedule when he entered her office without warning. "You must be the new assistant," he said, his deep voice filling the room. Emma looked up from her computer and felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. Up close, Ryan Thompson was even more disturbing. Amber eyes, almost golden, a sculpted jawline that could have been drawn by a Renaissance artist, and large hands that seemed made to command empires or destroy them. "Emma Mitchell," she introduced herself, proud that her voice hadn't trembled. Ryan studied her for a moment too long to be professional, too short to be considered inappropriate. "Rebecca told me you're exceptional with numbers and languages. I need you to review some contracts in French by tomorrow." It was the beginning of a silent and dangerous dance. Ryan began to request Emma's presence in meetings where she was clearly not necessary. Documents that could have been sent by email needed to be delivered personally to his office. On one occasion, he kept her late reviewing spreadsheets, only to then ask that they share a working dinner in the restaurant on the top floor. Emma knew she was entering dangerous territory. She saw the speculative glances from other employees, heard the whispers in the corridors. But there was something about Ryan that attracted her like a moth to a flame. Perhaps it was the loneliness she recognized in his eyes, or the way his hands sometimes trembled slightly when he was tired, revealing cracks in the armor of power he wore. One night, after a particularly intense day of work, Ryan invited her to visit his winery in upstate New York. "It's a personal project," he explained, his eyes fixed on hers. "Something separate from the family business. I'd like your opinion on some documents related to the export." Emma knew she should decline. Her mother had taught her about the dangers of the world, about powerful men and naive girls. But when she opened her mouth to decline, what came out was, "Do I need to bring anything specific to wear?" Ryan's smile was predatory. "Just yourself," he replied, and Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. That night, lying in her bed in the small rented apartment she prayed for the first time in years, she didn't know if she was asking for protection or courage. Perhaps deep down she was asking for forgiveness in advance for what she knew was about to happen. What Emma couldn't imagine was that this trip would change not only her life, but that of everyone around her, that her decisions in the coming weeks would trigger a series of events that would bring to light secrets buried for decades, and that the man she was beginning to desire harbored shadows in his past, capable of swallowing any light that dared to approach him. The Thompson Winery was located 2 hours from New York, on a property that seemed to have been transported directly from Tuscany. Ryan's car wound through precisely aligned vineyards, while the afternoon sun tinged everything golden. Emma observed the landscape through the Mercedes window, trying to ignore the disturbing proximity of the man beside her. Ryan drove in silence, his eyes fixed on the road, but Emma could feel the tension emanating from him in waves. Occasionally, his fingers drummed on the leather steering wheel, a gesture she had already learned to recognize as a sign of anxiety. It was strange to see this man, always so controlled, showing any kind of nervousness. The main house was an imposing colonial-style construction with thick adobe walls and tall windows. A middle-aged housekeeper received them at the entrance, her curious gaze alternating between Ryan and Emma. "Prepare dinner for 8, Marjorie," Ryan instructed, his voice leaving no room for questions. "And make sure the guest room is ready." Emma felt her stomach knot. Guest room. Of course she would need to sleep there. It was already getting dark and would be dangerous to return to the city at that hour, but the prospect of spending the night under the same roof as Ryan made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "I'll show you the wine cellar," Ryan announced after they left their bags. The temperature dropped several degrees when they entered the basement. Row after row of bottles extended into the dimness, some covered by a fine layer of dust indicating years of rest. The air smelled of oak, damp earth, and secrets. "This wine," Ryan said, removing a bottle with reverence, "is from a special vintage. 1985, the year I was born. My father kept a few bottles for truly unique occasions." His eyes met Emma's in the diffuse light. "I think today deserves one of them." Hours later, seated in the library after dinner, the wine had lowered several of the carefully constructed barriers between them. Emma discovered that Ryan had a surprisingly vulnerable side when talking about his childhood. "My father was a complicated man," he confided, swirling the wine in his glass. "Brilliant in business, but emotionally absent. I think that affected my mother more than anyone realized at the time." "And your ex-wife?" Emma ventured to ask, her tongue loosened by the alcohol. A muscle twitched in Ryan's jaw. "Adriana." He pronounced the name as if it was something bitter. "It was a mistake from the beginning. We married too young for the wrong reasons. She had her own demons." Emma couldn't tell who moved first. One moment they were sitting in separate armchairs. The next, she was in his lap, his large hands holding her face as if she were something precious and fragile. The kiss tasted like expensive wine and irreversible decisions. "We shouldn't," she tried to say, but her hands were already unbuttoning his shirt, discovering warm skin and defined muscles beneath the fine fabric. Ryan lifted her as if she weighed nothing, their mouths never separating as they climbed the stairs toward the master bedroom, not the guest room. The bedroom was like the man, elegant, domineering, and full of shadows. Emma trembled when he laid her on the king-size bed, the fresh Egyptian cotton sheets cool against her feverish skin. "We can still stop," Ryan murmured against her neck, but his hands were already exploring places that made Emma arch her back and sigh. "I don't want to stop," she answered, and it was like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. Ryan took her with an intensity that bordered on adoration. Each touch, each kiss seemed to mark her not just in body, but in soul. Emma gave herself completely, leaving behind years of reservations and fears. When pleasure finally struck her, it was like being hit by lightning, devastating, transformative, and irreversible. Afterward, lying against his chest, Emma realized she had crossed a line from which there was no return. Ryan played distractedly with a strand of her hair, his body relaxed in a way she had never seen during the day. "You are dangerous," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep and satisfaction. "Me?" Emma laughed softly. "You're the powerful Ryan Thompson." "Power is an illusion," he replied, suddenly serious. "The real danger is in finding someone who makes you want to lower all your defenses." The next morning, Emma woke up alone. For a moment of panic, she thought everything had been an elaborate dream, but the marks on her body and his scent on the sheets proved otherwise. She found Ryan on the veranda, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, speaking on the phone in rapid, irritated Italian. When he saw her, his eyes softened for a moment, but soon returned to their usual hardness. "We need to return to New York," he announced after hanging up. "There's a situation that requires my immediate attention." The return trip was silent, but in a different way than the journey there. Emma could feel that something had fundamentally changed between them, but she didn't know exactly what. When they arrived at the office, Ryan was already back in CEO mode, cold, focused, and distant. The following weeks were an emotional roller coaster. During the day, they maintained a facade of professionalism, although the glances exchanged in meetings made Emma blush. At night, he took her to his penthouse apartment in Tribeca, where the masks fell and they lost themselves in each other, with an intensity that sometimes frightened Emma. It was on one of those nights that she began to suspect something was wrong. The morning sickness, breast tenderness, constant fatigue, all the signs she had learned to recognize through conversations with her married friends. But Emma wasn't married. She was just the assistant who had fallen in love with her boss, committing the most cliché of mistakes. The pregnancy test, bought at a pharmacy far from her neighborhood, confirmed her fears on a Sunday morning. Positive. Emma stared at the 2 pink lines as if they were a death sentence. How had she, daughter of small-town teachers, raised between rosaries and novenas, allowed herself to reach this point? It took 3 days to summon the courage to tell Ryan. She chose a moment at the end of the workday, when the office was practically empty. He was concentrating on some documents when she entered his office, gently closing the door behind her. "Ryan," her voice came out firmer than she expected. "We need to talk." He looked up from the papers, and something in her expression must have betrayed the gravity of the situation, because he immediately dropped his pen and leaned back in his chair. "What happened?" "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma observed a series of emotions cross Ryan's face. Shock, confusion, something that looked like fear, and finally a mask of calculated indifference that she knew all too well. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice controlled. "Absolutely." Ryan stood up, walking around his imposing desk. For a moment, Emma hoped, that he would embrace her. Instead, he walked to the window, observing the city stretching below. "This complicates things," he finally said. "You understand that we can't. There are considerations that need to be made. The company's reputation, my position, the board." Each word was like a stab. Emma felt her knees weaken and leaned against the nearest wall. "What are you suggesting?" "I can arrange everything discreetly," he continued, still not looking at her. "I know a clinic in Switzerland, completely confidential. Afterward, we can discuss a promotion, perhaps a transfer to our branch in Seattle, with a considerable raise, of course." Emma felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the pregnancy. The man before her offering money for her to abort his child as if he were negotiating the purchase of a company wasn't the same one who had held her with such tenderness weeks ago. The decision to leave was made at that exact moment, crystalline as glass and irreversible as death. Emma left Ryan's office without saying anything more, her steps echoing through the empty corridor like a silent goodbye. At home, her hands trembled as she packed the essentials in a small suitcase, some clothes, documents, her mother's rosary, and the savings she kept for emergencies. She sent her resignation letter by email at midnight, blocked Ryan's number on her phone, and bought a bus ticket to Houston with one of the credit cards she hadn't yet cancelled. The southern city would be her refuge, sufficiently distant from New York to complicate any tracking attempt. The bus cut through the night as Emma watched the lights of New York disappear on the horizon. One hand resting on her still flat stomach, she allowed the tears to finally fall. She wasn't crying for Ryan, or at least tried to convince herself of that. She cried for the small-town girl who had dreamed of true love, for the woman who discovered herself stronger than she had imagined, and for the baby growing inside her, a baby who was already loved, regardless of the circumstances of its conception. Houston welcomed her with its intense light and stifling heat. Emma rented a simple room in Montrose, close to downtown, and immediately began looking for work. Her experience as an executive assistant opened some doors, but she opted for something more discreet, a position as a proofreader at a small Catholic publishing house, specializing in religious books and educational materials. The months passed like pages of a book being turned by the wind. Her body changed, adapting to the new life she carried. At prenatal consultations, she always went alone, responding with a sad smile when nurses asked about the father. In her moments of solitude, she caught herself wondering if Ryan had noticed her absence, if he had tried to look for her, if he felt any remorse. The birth happened on a hot March dawn. Alone in the waiting room, between increasingly strong contractions, Emma prayed, not the memorized prayers of her childhood, but an intimate conversation with a God she hoped still cared about girls who had lost their way. Michael was born. At dawn, his first cry echoing through the room like a victory hymn. When the nurse placed him in her arms, Emma understood for the first time the meaning of unconditional love. The baby was perfect. He had her dark hair, but his eyes, those amber eyes, were unmistakably Ryan's. The following years were an exercise in survival and reinvention. Emma built a new life centered on Michael. her days divided between work at the publishing house and caring for her son. The boy grew up smart and curious, with a sweetness that sometimes broke her heart. In the moments when he surprised her, with a gesture or expression that reminded her of Ryan, Emma wondered if she had made the right choice in never telling the father about his existence. The publishing house where she worked was a welcoming environment, almost like family. Her boss, Mrs. Doris, a 70-year-old woman with teenage energy, became a sort of mentor and surrogate grandmother to Michael. It was she who suggested that Emma specialize in editing, even paying for part of the course. "You have talent, girl," Mrs. Doris would say. "You can't stay forever correcting commas in prayer books." Life had found its rhythm, a comfortable routine that, if not exactly happy, was at least safe. Until that Wednesday morning, when Emma arrived at work and found a strange atmosphere. At the publishing house, employees were whispering in corners and Mrs. Doris immediately called her into her office. "The publishing house has been sold," she announced without preamble. "A group from New York. They say it's just an administrative reorganization, that nothing will change, but—" She hesitated, a paper in her hands trembling slightly. "Look at the name of the purchasing company." Emma felt her blood freeze in her veins as she read the letterhead of the document. Thompson Publishing, a subsidiary of Thompson Industries Group. "It must be a coincidence," she murmured, more to herself than to Mrs. Doris. But she knew it wasn't. Ryan had always been methodical in his business moves. If the publishing house had been bought by his group, it wasn't by chance. That night, after putting Michael to bed, Emma spent hours searching the internet. She discovered that in recent years, the Thompson Group had expanded to the south, discreetly buying companies in various sectors. The acquisition of the small Catholic publishing house made no sense within the group's portfolio, unless there was another motive. Fear, which had long slept in a dark corner of her heart, began to awaken. Emma knew she needed to prepare for the inevitable. Ryan would find her. It wasn't a question of if, but when. The answer came faster than she expected. A week after the news of the sale, the publishing house announced that it would receive a visit from representatives of the group for a meeting with all employees. Emma thought about calling in sick, inventing an illness, anything. But something inside her, pride perhaps, or simply fatigue from running, made her go to work that day. The auditorium was packed when Ryan entered, even more imposing than in her memories. 4 years hadn't changed much about his physical appearance, but there was something different in his eyes, a new hardness, mixed with a kind of hunger that made Emma shrink in her chair. Their gazes met at the exact moment he climbed onto the stage. Emma saw recognition cross his face like lightning, followed by something that looked like pain. For a second, time seemed to freeze, and they were again those two people in the winery library, on the edge of a precipice. Then Michael came running into the auditorium. "Mommy!" he called, his little voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Mrs. Doris said you forgot your folder in her office." Emma watched in slow motion as Ryan shifted his gaze from her to the boy. She saw his eyes widen as he noticed the amber color identical to his own, the shape of the chin, the posture that already revealed the man he would one day become. She saw the exact moment when understanding hit him, his fingers gripping the podium so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The rest of the meeting passed like a blur. Emma barely registered the words about restructuring and new horizons. All she could see was the way Ryan couldn't take his eyes off Michael, as if he were memorizing every detail of the son he didn't know he had. When the meeting ended, Emma picked Michael up and practically ran for the exit. But before she could reach the door, she heard the voice that still populated her nightmares. Emma. Her name in his mouth still had the power to make her tremble. "We need to talk." She turned slowly, holding Michael against her chest like a shield. The boy, oblivious to the tension, was playing with a strand of her hair. "We have nothing to talk about, Mr. Thompson," she replied, proud that her voice didn't reveal the whirlwind of emotions she felt. "He's my son." It wasn't a question. "He's my son," Emma corrected, lifting her chin in defiance, "and I'll do anything to protect him." Ryan's smile was both sad and threatening. You can't prevent me from knowing my own son, Emma, not after stealing 4 years of his life from me. Stolen? The word hit her like a slap. You offered me money to abort him, as if he were a problem to be solved. I was an idiot. Ryan took a step toward her. And I've been paying for that mistake every day since you disappeared. Michael chose that moment to turn in his mother's arms, his curious eyes fixed on Ryan. Who are you? He asked with the innocence of children. Ryan's face softened in a way Emma had never seen before. I'm a friend of your mother's, he answered, his voice choked, from a long time ago. The days following the reunion were an exercise in precarious balance. Emma tried to maintain her normal routine with Michael, but she felt Ryan's invisible, eyes everywhere. Dark cars parked near her son's school, new employees appearing at the publishing house with suspicious frequency, mysterious emails arriving in her inbox with offers of promotion. On a particularly tense morning, Emma found on her desk a manila envelope with no return address. Inside, photos of Michael at different moments, playing in the park, leaving school, eating ice cream with her at the mall. The message was clear. Ryan was watching, collecting pieces of the life he had missed, building his own archive of stolen memories. You can't keep doing this, Emma confronted Ryan after working hours, barging into his temporary office at the publishing house. He had his back to the door, observing the view of old Houston through the window, the setting sun transforming his silhouette into an elongated shadow. Doing what, exactly? His voice sounded dangerously calm. Trying to get to know my son. The same son whose existence you hid from me for 4 years. You're stalking us. Emma threw the envelope with the photos on his desk. This is sick, Ryan. It's scary. He turned slowly, his amber eyes darkened by an emotion Emma couldn't decipher. You know what's sick? Spending 4 years wondering where you were, if you were okay, if you had moved on with your life. And then discovering that not only were you alive and well, but that I had a son. A son. His voice rose on the last word, making Emma take an involuntary step back. You had no right, he continued, each word loaded with contained anger. No matter what I said that day, no matter how much of an idiot I was. He is my blood, Emma. My son. And what did you expect? Emma countered, years of hurt giving strength to her voice. That I would stay? After you treated our situation like a corporate inconvenience to be resolved with money? You didn't even ask what I wanted, Ryan. You just assumed I would accept your discreet solution. A muscle twitched in Ryan's jaw. He circled the desk, approaching her with the predatory grace Emma remembered all too well. And if I said I regretted those words the moment they left my mouth, that I spent the last 4 years trying to find you, not to take revenge, but to try to fix the biggest mistake of my life. Emma felt her heart accelerate with his proximity. The familiar scent, wood and spices, hit her like a wave of unwanted memories. You're lying, she whispered, but her voice betrayed her uncertainty. I'm many things, Emma, but I've never been a liar. Ryan was close enough now to touch her, but kept his hands rigidly at his sides. When you disappeared, something in me broke. I immersed myself in work, expanded the group, bought companies, all to try to fill a void that made no sense. It wasn't just about you. It was about lost possibilities, about a life I didn't even know I wanted until I lost the chance to have it. And now, Emma asked, hating the tremor in her voice, what do you want now? I want to know my son, the answer came without hesitation. I want to be part of his life. I want to make up for lost time. And what about me? The words escaped before Emma could contain them. Ryan's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability crossing his features. You never left my thoughts, Emma. Not for a day. It was as if something broke inside her, a dam of emotions contained for so long. Emma felt tears begin to fall, and she hated herself for this weakness. It's not that simple, she said between sobs. Michael is my whole life. I protected him alone all this time. I can't just... Let me prove it, Ryan interrupted her, his hand finally touching her face, wiping away a tear with his thumb. I'm not asking you to return to my life as if nothing happened. I'm asking for a chance to know my son, to show you that I'm not the same man from 4 years ago." His touch was electrifying, awakening sensations that Emma had tried so hard to bury. Part of her wanted to surrender to that moment, to believe that people could change, that second chances were possible, but the rational part, the mother who had fought so hard to build a safe life for her son, sounded a warning alarm. "How can I trust you?" she asked, taking a step back, breaking the contact. "You bought the publishing house where I work just to find me. You're surveilling our daily life. This doesn't seem like the behavior of someone who has changed." Ryan let his arm fall, a sad smile playing on his lips. "You're right. My actions may seem extreme, but try to understand. When I discovered the possibility of you being in Houston, when I finally had a clue after so long, I lost my reason. I wanted to be sure before approaching. I wanted to know the life you had built. I wanted to control me," Emma completed, bitter. "To prepare myself," he corrected, "in case you completely rejected me, in case there was no more room for me in the life you had built." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken possibilities. Emma could feel the weight of the choices before her. She could keep her defenses up, continue protecting Michael from the emotional whirlwind that was his father, or she could take a risk, give Ryan the chance he was asking for, allow her son to know his origins, his roots. "Michael has been asking about his father," she finally said, her voice low. "Until now I've managed to deflect the subject, but he's becoming more curious, more observant." Ryan's face lit up with hope. "And what do you tell him?" "That his father lives far away, that sometimes adults need to be apart, even when there's love involved." Emma ran her hand through her hair, a nervous gesture that Ryan remembered well. "I never said anything negative about you. I didn't want him to grow up with resentment." "Thank you for that," Ryan said softly. "It means a lot to me." "I didn't do it for you," Emma replied, "but without hostility. I did it for him. Michael deserves to form his own opinions when he's older." "And now?" Ryan took a cautious step toward her. "Can he start forming those opinions?" Emma closed her eyes for a moment, weighing her options. When she opened them again, there was a new determination in her gaze. "We can try, but with conditions." "Which? Juan's?" "First, this happens on my time, my way. No surprise appearances, no expensive gifts or attempts to buy his affection. Second, you stop the surveillance. No photos, no people following us. And third," she hesitated. "Tell me," Ryan encouraged. "I need to know everything," Emma completed. "About your past, about your ex-wife, about the rumors that have always surrounded your family. If I'm going to allow you to be part of my son's life, I need to know exactly who you are." Ryan tensed, a shadow crossing his face. "Some stories. God better left in the past, Emma. Not if you want a future with your son." The clock on the wall marked the hours with a merciless tick-tock as Ryan considered her words. Finally he nodded. "All right, but not here. I'll take you to dinner tomorrow night. Without Michael, just the two of us, and I'll tell you everything, including parts I'd prefer to forget." The restaurant chosen by Ryan was on the top floor of one of Houston's most exclusive hotels, with a view of the sea and the illuminated city. Emma arrived punctually at 8, wearing a simple but elegant navy blue dress, a concession to the occasion that she tried to convince herself had nothing to do with the man who awaited her. Ryan was already there, standing near the veranda, his dark suit impeccable, contrasting with the obvious tension in his shoulders. When he saw her, his eyes sparkled with something that could be admiration or remorse, perhaps a mixture of both. "You look beautiful," he said simply, pulling out the chair for her. Emma felt an involuntary shiver as she sensed his cologne. "So close." "I'm not here to exchange compliments, Ryan," she replied, keeping her voice firm. "You promised answers." He nodded, sitting across from her. A sommelier approached with a bottle of wine, but Ryan dismissed him with a gesture. "I think this conversation requires total sobriety," he explained, ordering only water for both. "Where do you want to start?" he asked after a few moments of tense silence. "At the beginning," Emma replied. "The rumors about your mother, are they true?" Ryan took a deep breath, his fingers drumming lightly on the table, That old nervous tick that Emma knew so well. Partially, he began. My mother really did have a nervous breakdown, but it wasn't sudden, as they say. It was a long, painful process that began long before I was born. He paused, as if organizing thoughts long buried. My parents married, for convenience. She was from a traditional family in decline. He was building his empire and needed social connections. At first it worked. She was the perfect hostess, the trophy wife he wanted to display at events, but then the losses began. Losses? Emma leaned slightly forward, intrigued. Miscarriages. 3 before me. Each one further deteriorated. Her sanity. When she finally managed to have me, she was already fragile. She would spend days locked in her room talking to the babies she had lost. My father, in his infinite wisdom, the sarcasm in his voice was cutting, decided that the best thing was to pretend nothing was happening. He kept her medicated, isolated, protected from society's eyes. Emma felt her heart tighten. Suddenly, much of Ryan's coldness began to make sense. And you? What was it like growing up like that? A bitter smile curved his lips. How do you think? I was the child who survived, the heir who needed to be perfect to compensate for everything else. My father raised me as if he were molding his business successor, not a son. Love was a weakness we couldn't afford to have. And your ex-wife, Adriana? Emma asked softly, noticing how Ryan's hands closed into fists at hearing the name. Adriana was complicated, he began, choosing his words carefully. We met in Milan during a merger between our companies. She was beautiful, intelligent, and as damaged as I was. I thought we had something in common, that we could fix each other. Ryan paused to take a sip of water, but Emma could see he was just buying time. The marriage was a disaster from the start. Adriana had her own demons, untreated bipolar disorder, chemical dependency she tried to hide. I was too busy proving my worth to the company board to see the signs. When I finally realized how deeply she was sinking, it was too late. What happened to her? Emma whispered, fearing the answer. She tried to kill herself in our bedroom, Ryan said, his voice devoid of emotion, as if he were reporting facts from a business case. I found her in time, but that changed everything. After her recovery in the hospital, she agreed to go to a clinic in Switzerland. The divorce was discreet, generous. She still lives there as far as I know. Sometimes I receive reports on her progress. Emma let the information sink in slowly. Why are you telling me all this now? Because you need to understand, Ryan leaned forward, his intense eyes fixed on hers. When you told me you were pregnant, all my past exploded in front of me. I saw my mother and her lost babies. I saw Adriana and her self-destruction. I saw all the patterns I was destined to repeat. I panicked. So you offered money for me to have an abortion, Emma completed, the old hurt still present in her voice. It was the most cowardly thing I've ever done in my life, he admitted, the vulnerability in his voice surprising Emma. The moment you left that room, I knew I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I tried to find you, but you had already disappeared. What changed? Emma asked, studying his face for any sign of manipulation. Why would it be different now? Ryan was silent for a long moment, as if weighing each word. In these 4 years, I've done a lot of internal work. Therapy, something I always considered weakness. I confronted my own demons, the patterns I inherited from my father. And mainly I realized I was repeating with you and our son exactly what was done to me, trying to control, manipulate, hide emotions behind money and power. He extended his hand across the table, not quite touching hers, but close enough for Emma to feel the warmth of his skin. I'm not asking for us to go back to what we were. I know I hurt you in an unforgivable way. But for Michael, for him, I'm willing to do anything, be anything you need me to be. Emma studied the man before her, not the powerful CEO, not the heir to an empire, but simply Ryan, a man carrying the weight of generations of unresolved trauma, trying not to transmit them to the next generation. And if I said I also have my own demons? She asked softly. That I also have fears and scars I never shared? Ryan's gaze softened, Then I would say perhaps we can face them together, not as a couple, not now, but as parents, as two people trying to do better for the next generation. Emma finally allowed her hand to meet his on the table. The touch was familiar and strange at the same time, loaded with memories and possibilities. Michael has a recital at school next week, she said after a moment. He's playing piano, first Beethoven, then Gershwin. Ryan's face lit up with genuine surprise and pride. He plays piano? Since he was 4. Has a natural talent. Emma allowed herself a small smile. Like his father. May I go? The question came out almost like a plea, and Emma saw in that moment not the powerful Ryan Thompson, but a desperate father wanting to know his son. You may, she answered. But first we need to prepare Michael, explain things the right way at his pace. Ryan nodded, gently squeezing her hand. On your time, your way. I promise. As the night progressed and the conversation flowed to other topics, Michael's tastes, his habits, his first words, Emma realized that something was changing inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps understanding. And with understanding came the possibility of a new beginning, not just for her and Ryan, but mainly for Michael. The morning of the recital arrived with a light rain typical of Houston, transforming the already dense air into a curtain of humidity that made Emma's hair rebel. Sitting on the edge of Michael's bed, she watched her son meticulously arrange the bow tie of his school's gala uniform, his small fingers struggling with the knot. Let me help you, love, she offered, but Michael shook his head. I can do it. Myself, Mom, he insisted, his tongue appearing at the corner of his mouth in concentration. Emma smiled, recognizing in that stubbornness undeniable traces of Ryan. They had talked with Michael throughout the week, gradually preparing him for what was to come. Emma had chosen her words carefully, explaining that his father had finally managed to find them and very much wanted to meet him. To her surprise, Michael had received the news with an almost adult calmness. He's that man from your work, isn't he? Asked the boy. The one who has the same eyes as me? The child's perceptiveness sometimes frightened Emma. Yes, my love, how did you know? Michael shrugged, that universal gesture of children. He kept looking at me differently, and Mrs. Doris said he looks like me. Now, watching her son prepare for his presentation, Emma felt a confused mixture of emotions. Part of her still wanted to protect Michael from everything and everyone, to keep him in the safe cocoon she had built over the years. But another part, a part that grew each day, recognized that her son deserved the chance to know his origins, to understand where he came from. The school auditorium was packed when they arrived. Proud parents wielded cameras and phones, grandparents competed for the best seats, and the buzz of expectation filled the air. Emma led Michael to the improvised backstage where the other little artists were preparing, adjusting his jacket one last time. You're going to be amazing, she whispered, kissing the top of his head. Is he here yet? Michael asked, and Emma felt her heart tighten at noticing the barely disguised anxiety in her son's voice. He should be arriving, she replied, silently praying that Ryan wouldn't make her regret this decision. As if summoned by her thoughts, Ryan appeared at the backstage door. He was impeccable in a navy blue suit, but there was something different in his posture, a vulnerability Emma had never seen before. In his hands he carried what looked like an old leather folder. May I come in? He asked, his eyes alternating between Emma and Michael. Emma nodded, stepping aside. Michael looked at his father with a mixture of curiosity and shyness, his fingers nervously playing with the hem of his jacket. Hi, Michael, Ryan said softly, kneeling to be at his son's height. Your mother told me you're going to play Beethoven today. And Gershwin, Michael completed, lifting his chin with a pride that made Ryan smile. Did you know that I also played piano when I was your age? Ryan opened the folder he was carrying, revealing yellowed sheet music. These were mine. I thought you might like to have them. Michael's eyes widened at seeing the old pages. Are they really yours? All mine, including, Ryan carefully turned some pages. This one was my favorite. When I was about your age, it was sheet music for Fur Elise. the pencil annotations in the margins revealing the studies of another boy decades ago. Michael touched the paper with reverence, his fingers tracing the notes as if he could feel them. "Why did you stop playing?" he asked innocently. Emma saw something darken in Ryan's eyes, an old shadow of pain or regret, but his voice remained soft when he answered, "Sometimes adults make mistakes, son. They set aside things they love because they think they need to be different from what they are." The use of the word son didn't go unnoticed by Emma. It was the first time Ryan had pronounced it aloud, and the weight of that moment hung in the air between them. "Do you want to hear me play?" Michael asked, and there was something so hopeful in his voice that Emma felt tears forming in her eyes. "More than anything in the world," Ryan answered with sincerity. The recital was a success. Michael played with the concentration and grace of someone far beyond his years. From the first row, Emma observed not only her son but also Ryan seated a few chairs away from her. She saw how he followed each of Michael's movements, how his eyes shone with undisguised pride, how his hands sometimes moved slightly, accompanying the music as if remembering what it was like to play it. When Michael finished his performance, the ovation was instantaneous. Emma applauded hard, tears flowing freely down her face, but it was Ryan's reaction that caught her by surprise. He was also crying, discreetly wiping his eyes with a silk handkerchief. At the end of the event, while the other parents gathered to congratulate their children, Ryan approached Emma. "He is extraordinary," he said quietly. "He has a natural gift that I never had." "He practices a lot," Emma responded. "He's dedicated, perfectionist." "Like his mother," Ryan completed, a half-smile on his lips. Michael ran up to them, still flushed from the presentation and the compliments. "Did you see? I didn't miss a single note." "We saw, my love." Emma bent down to hug him. "You were perfect." "What did you think?" Michael asked, looking directly at Ryan, and there was so much expectation in that question that it hurt. Ryan knelt again, coming to his son's height. "I think you have incredible talent, Michael, and I promise that if you want, I can help you develop it even more." The boy's eyes shone. "How?" "Well, for starters," Ryan cast a questioning look at Emma as if asking permission. "There's an international music school in New York that offers online classes. They have the best teachers in the world and—" "Ryan," Emma interrupted, her warning tone clear. "Just online classes," he quickly assured. "No changes, no pressure. Just an opportunity for Michael to develop his talent with the best teachers available." Emma looked at her son, who was practically vibrating with expectation. "We can talk about this later," she finally conceded. "We have ice cream while we talk," Michael suggested. And there was so much calculated innocence in his expression that both adults laughed. "I think we deserve a celebration," Emma agreed. "What do you think, Ryan?" His smile was genuine, not the controlled smile of the executive, but something more real, more vulnerable. It would be an honor. They walked to the nearest ice cream shop, Michael between them chattering about his presentation. Emma allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, that maybe, just maybe, there was a path to heal old wounds and build something new. Not for the past that she and Ryan shared, but for the future that Michael deserved to have. The following weeks established a cautious routine. Ryan remained in Houston, managing the group's business remotely from a rented penthouse in the River Oaks district. 3 times a week, Michael had his online piano lessons, and Ryan frequently appeared at Emma's apartment to witness his son's progress, always maintaining a respectful distance that she had established. It was during one of those visits that the first sign of trouble appeared. Emma was in the kitchen preparing coffee while Michael proudly showed Ryan his new sheet music when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole she saw an elegant woman approximately 40 years old, with dark hair and markedly Italian features. Emma's blood froze in her veins. She knew that face from old tabloids, from the photos she had obsessively researched years ago. Adriana Visconti, Ryan's ex-wife. "Emma? Who is it?" Ryan called from the living room, noticing her hesitation. Before she could answer, Adriana began knocking on the door more forcefully. "I know you're in there, Ryan. Her voice had a heavy accent and a slightly hysterical tone. "You cannot hide from me." Ryan appeared in the hallway in 3 large strides, his face losing all color as he recognized the voice. "Take Michael to the bedroom," he instructed Emma in a low, urgent voice. "Now." Emma didn't need to be told twice. She ran to the living room, taking Michael by the hand. "Come, love, I need to show you something in the bedroom." "But I want to show one more song to Daddy," the boy protested, using for the first time that word that made Ryan's heart skip a beat. "Later, son," Ryan promised, his voice controlled despite the obvious tension. "Go with your mother now." As soon as Emma closed the bedroom door with Michael, she heard Ryan open the front door. The sound of a slap cut through the air, followed by Adriana's furious voice. 4 years, Ryan. 4 years looking for you, trying to understand why you simply stopped sending the reports, stopped responding to the lawyers. And now I discover that you're here, playing daddy with some little secretary and your bastard." "Lower your voice," Ryan's response came in a furious hiss. "You have no right to be here. Our agreement was clear. You would stay in Switzerland. Receive your money and keep your distance." "The agreement?" Adriana laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "The agreement that you broke when you stopped the payments, when you cancelled my access to the accounts, when you sent your lawyers to block my entry into the country." In the bedroom, Emma tried to distract Michael with a game on the tablet, but her own heart was beating erratically. Through the door, she could hear the argument getting increasingly heated. "I cancelled everything because you broke your part of the agreement." Ryan's voice was dangerously controlled. "The drugs, Adriana. The hospitalizations you tried to hide. The scandals in Milan." "Don't you dare judge me," Adriana shouted. "You have no idea what it's like to live with the ghosts you created, with the guilt you planted in my head." "I didn't plant anything in your head," Ryan retorted. "You chose your own demons. Now get out of here before I call security." "Ah, but I'm not going anywhere." Adriana's tone changed, becoming almost syrupy. "Not until I get what I came for. How much do you think the magazines would pay for this adorable story? The powerful Ryan Thompson, the man who forcibly committed me for years, hiding an illegitimate child in the South?" Emma felt her blood boil. She stood up, ignoring Michael's protests, and opened the bedroom door. Ryan and Adriana turned to her, surprised by her sudden appearance. "Miss Visconti," Emma said, her voice firm despite the fear running through her veins, "I suggest you leave my apartment now. My son is in the next room and he doesn't need to hear any more of this conversation." Adriana examined her from head to toe with a disdainful smile. "So you're the mistress. Should I congratulate you? You achieved what I never could. A Thompson heir." "I'm not anyone's mistress." Emma took a step forward, lifting her chin. "I'm a mother protecting her son. And unlike you, I don't need money or scandals to feel validated." "You insolent little slut." Adriana advanced toward Emma, but Ryan held her by the arm. "Enough," he growled. "You have 10 seconds to get out of here, or I swear to God, Adriana, you'll discover that I can still be much worse than I was in the past." Something in his tone must have penetrated Adriana's fog of rage because she took a step back. "This isn't over, Ryan," she threatened, adjusting her designer bag on her shoulder. "You'll regret having traded me for this." When the door finally closed behind her, the silence that fell in the apartment was deafening. Emma trembled, both from anger and fear. Ryan approached her hesitantly, as if wanting to touch her, but she raised a hand, keeping distance. "What did she mean by forcibly committed?" Emma asked, her voice low but firm. Ryan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she knew well. "It's complicated, Emma." "Then simplify," she insisted, "because now it's not just about the two of us. It's about Michael, and I need to know exactly what kind of danger you've brought to our door." Before Ryan could answer, a sound coming from the bedroom froze them. Michael was coughing, a dry, harsh sound that Emma had never heard before. "Michael!" she called, running to the bedroom. The boy was sitting on the bed, one hand on his chest, struggling to breathe. "Mom," he gasped, "my chest hurts." Panic took hold of Emma when she saw her son's lips beginning to turn bluish. Ryan appeared at her side in an instant, already with the phone at his ear calling an ambulance. "Does he have any heart problems?" Ryan asked urgently while picking up his son in his arms. "No," Emma replied, grabbing her purse and car keys with trembling hands. "He's never had anything like this before." But as they rushed to the elevator, Michael still struggling to breathe in his father's arms, Emma remembered something she had read years ago about the Thompson family, about a hereditary heart condition that had killed Ryan's grandfather while still young. A family secret that, like so many others, was about to come to light in the worst possible way. The corridor of the private hospital pulsed with a nervous energy as Emma and Ryan waited for news. Michael had been taken immediately to the emergency room, a team of doctors already alerted by a call from Ryan during the journey. Emma could still hear the sound of her son's difficult breathing, see his frightened eyes as he was carried away on a stretcher. "Why did you never tell me?" She broke the silence, her voice laden with accusation. "About your family's heart condition?" Ryan was standing by the window, his silhouette outlined against the city lights. "Because I never wanted to believe it was real myself," he answered, after a long moment. "My father, he always insisted they were just stories, coincidences, that my grandfather's heart problem had been caused by his lifestyle, not by genetics. And you believed that?" Emma stood up, anger giving strength to her voice. "Or did you simply choose to ignore it, like you ignore everything that doesn't fit into your perfect vision of control?" Ryan turned to face her, and there was a raw pain in his eyes that caught her by surprise. "I had every possible examination when I was younger. I never showed any symptoms. When you disappeared pregnant, I convinced myself that even if there was any risk, it would be minimal." "Minimal," Emma laughed without humor. "Our son is in an emergency room fighting to breathe, and you talk about minimal risk?" Before Ryan could respond, a doctor approached them. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes behind thin-framed glasses. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," he began, but Emma interrupted him. "Mitchell. Emma Mitchell. How is my son?" The doctor nodded, consulting his clipboard. "Michael is stabilized. Preliminary tests indicate a condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It's a genetic condition that causes thickening of the heart muscle," Ryan completed, his voice hoarse. "My grandfather died from it at 42. "Exactly," the doctor confirmed. "In Michael's case, we identified it early, which is a great advantage, but he will need constant monitoring, specific medication, and possibly surgery in the future." Emma felt her legs weaken and had to lean against the wall. Ryan took a step toward her, as if wanting to support her, but she stopped him with a look. Can he have a normal life?" she asked the doctor. "With proper treatment, yes. But certain activities will need to be limited. Competitive sports, for example, are out of the question. And he will need to be monitored regularly by a specialized team." "There's an excellent team in New York," Ryan intervened. "The best pediatric cardiology specialists in the country." Emma felt her heart tighten. There it was, the moment she had feared so much, when her carefully constructed life in Houston would begin to crumble. "Can I see my son?" she asked the doctor, deliberately ignoring Ryan's comment. The doctor nodded. "He's awake and asking for you. But please, one at a time. He still needs tranquility." Emma entered the room first. Michael seemed even smaller in the hospital bed, connected to monitors that beeped softly. His face was pale, but his eyes lit up when he saw his mother. "Hi, Mum," he said, his voice weak but clear. "Sorry I scared you." Emma felt the tears she had contained for hours finally overflow. "Don't apologize, my love. None of this is your fault." She sat on the edge of the bed, holding her son's small hand between hers. Michael observed her with those amber eyes so similar to his father's, eyes that now carried a wisdom beyond his years. "The doctor said my heart is special," he commented, "that it needs extra care." "Yes, my love," Emma agreed, trying to keep her voice steady, "but we're going to take very good care of it, I promise." "Does Dad have a heart like this too?" The innocent question hit Emma like a punch. "No, sweetheart. But it's something that comes from his family, from your great-grandfather." Michael was silent for a moment, processing the information. Is that why the woman was shouting today? Was she angry because of my heart? Emma froze. You heard the argument? Michael nodded slightly. A little. She seemed very angry with Dad. And with you too. That woman, she is someone from... Your father's past. Emma chose her words carefully. Sometimes adults have complicated problems that have nothing to do with you, my love. Will she come back? There was a touch of fear in Michael's voice that broke Emma's heart. No, son. I won't let anyone disturb our peace again. Outside the room, Ryan waited his turn, listening to the conversation through the half-open door. Each word was like a knife in his chest, the fear in his son's voice, Emma's protective determination, Adriana's shadow hanging over all of them. When Emma finally left the room, her eyes were red but determined. He wants to see you, she said simply. Ryan entered the room with a heavy heart. Michael smiled weakly at him, and in that moment all the fortunes of the world, all the power he had built seemed completely meaningless. Hey, champ, he said softly, sitting where Emma had been moments before. Hi, Dad, Michael replied, and, even in those circumstances, the word still made Ryan's heart leap. I guess I won't be able to have my piano lesson tomorrow. Ryan tried to smile, swallowing the knot in his throat. That's okay. You need to rest now. When you're better, we can play together. How about that? Michael's eyes, his eyes, sparkled. With interest. You still know how to play? I'm a little rusty, Ryan admitted. But for you, I can try to remember. They talked for a few minutes, Ryan trying to keep the tone light despite the weight in his heart. When Michael began to show signs of fatigue, he stood up to leave. Dad? Michael's sleepy voice stopped him at the door. Are you going to stay? Here? With us? Ryan felt the tears he had contained all day finally threaten to fall. Yes, son. I'm not going anywhere. In the corridor, Emma was waiting for him with her arms crossed. We need to talk, she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Ryan nodded, following her to a more private area of the hospital. Emma turned to face him, her green eyes shining with a mixture of fear and determination. I know what you're going to say, she began, about the doctors in New York, about the best treatment conditions. But I need you to understand something. I won't allow you to use Michael's illness to try to control our lives. Emma, Ryan took a step toward her, it's not about control, it's about giving our son the best possible chance. And what about Adriana? Emma countered. How long until she appears again? How long until the press discovers everything? Do you have any idea what that would do to Michael? Ryan ran his hand over his face, suddenly looking exhausted. I can handle Adriana. I can protect you. Like, you forcibly committed her, Emma interrupted. Is that how you handle problems, Ryan, making people disappear into clinics in Switzerland? The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan seemed to have aged 10 years in one day. You want to know the truth, he finally said, his voice low and intense. Adriana was destroying herself. Drugs, erratic behavior, suicide attempts. The commitment wasn't just my decision, it was her family's too. But she never forgave me for taking the initiative. And now she wants revenge, Emma completed. She wants money, Ryan corrected, and attention, always has. But you're right about one thing, I can't allow her to get near Michael. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. Then give me your word, she finally said. Swear that you'll resolve this without turning our lives into a media circus, without trying to drag us to New York, without trying to take control of everything. Emma, swear, Ryan, or I'll take Michael as soon as he's discharged and disappear again, and this time you'll never find us. Emma's threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Ryan stared at her for a long time, his face a mask of contradictory emotions. Finally he spoke, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and resignation. You win, he said simply. I'll do it your way. But fate had other plans. The next morning, while Michael was still recovering in the hospital, headlines exploded across all. The country's news portals. Secret Thompson heir discovered in Houston. Ex-wife reveals tycoon's illegitimate son. Thompson empire shaken by family scandal. Emma was changing Michael's IV when her boss, Mrs. Doris, called in panic. "There's a crowd of reporters in front of the publishing house," she informed, "and I just received a call from your building. They're there too. Emma, what's happening?" Before she could answer, Ryan burst into the room, his countenance darker than she had ever seen. "We need to get you out of here now," he declared, already beginning to collect Michael's belongings. "The hospital will soon be surrounded." "What are you talking about?" Emma asked, although she already knew the answer. Ryan handed her his tablet. On the screen, beside the sensationalist headlines, there were photos. She and Michael at the school recital, the three of them at the ice cream shop, even images of the moment they entered the hospital the night before. And in all the reports, explosive quotes from Adriana Visconti. "Ryan Thompson hid the existence of his son for years while keeping me prisoner in a clinic in Switzerland," Emma read aloud, her stomach turning. "Now that I've discovered the truth, I fear for the child's safety. The Thompson family has a dark history of secrets and mysterious deaths." "Mommy." Michael's sleepy voice brought them back to reality. "What's happening?" Emma exchanged a look with Ryan. How to explain to a 4-year-old child that his life had just become a media circus? "We're going on a trip, my love," she improvised, forcing a smile. "The doctor said you're already strong enough to move, and we—" "Emma," Ryan gently interrupted her. "He deserves the truth." She nodded, sitting on the edge of her son's bed. "Remember that woman who came to our house yesterday? She told some people about you, people who are now very curious to meet us." "Why?" Michael frowned, confused. "Because your father is a very important person," Emma explained, choosing her words carefully. "And some people think they have the right to know everything about his life." "Like paparazzi?" Michael asked, surprising both adults. "Like those who follow famous people on TV?" "Exactly," Ryan approached, sitting on the other side of the bed. "And that's why we need to go to a safe place for a while, where these people can't bother us." Michael seemed to consider this for a moment. "But what about my piano lessons and school and my friends?" Emma felt her heart tighten. This was exactly why she had always feared Ryan's world, for the way it could turn people's lives upside down in a matter of hours. "It will only be for a while, son," Ryan promised, but Emma noticed something in his eyes that made her uneasy. "I have a house on a private island off the coast. No one can reach it without authorization. You'll be safe while I resolve this situation." "You?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "You're not coming?" "I can't," Ryan replied, his expression hardening. "I need to stay and deal with Adriana, with the press, with the company board. But you'll be protected. The island has private security, a medical team, everything Michael might need." "No," Emma stood up, crossing her arms. "I won't let you hide us on an island as if we were a dirty secret. If you want to protect us, find another way." "What other way, Emma?" Ryan exploded, although keeping his voice low because of Michael. "You saw the headlines. You saw what Adriana is capable of. She won't stop until she destroys everything. My reputation, the company, our chance to give Michael a normal life." "And your solution is to send us to an island, like you did with her?" The blow hit Ryan squarely. He took a step back as if he had been slapped. "It's not the same thing," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm trying to protect you." "Daddy?" Michael's small voice cut through the tension between them. "Are you scared?" The innocent question seemed to completely disarm Ryan. He turned to his son, and Emma saw his defenses crumble. "Yes, son," he admitted, sitting down again. "I'm very scared. Of losing you. Of not being able to protect you. Of making the same mistakes my father made." Michael extended his small hand, touching his father's face with a gentleness that made Emma's eyes burn. "You don't need to be scared. I'm strong. The doctor said so." Ryan held his son's hand against his face, and Emma saw silent tears begin to stream down his cheeks. It was the first time she had seen him cry openly. "Ryan," she called softly, her own anger diminishing in the face of this display of vulnerability. "There must be another way." He wiped his eyes, still holding Michael's hand. Maybe. Maybe there is. But you won't like it. Try me. Marry me. Emma felt as if all the air had been sucked from the room. What? Not for love, Ryan continued quickly. Not now, but for Michael. If we marry, you'll have full legal protection. You'll be able to use the family's resources to keep him safe. And Adriana will lose any bargaining power. She'll just be the bitter ex-wife trying to destroy an established family. You're crazy, Emma whispered. I'm being practical, Ryan countered. It's the only way to protect Michael without hiding him from the world. He'll be able to maintain his life here, his lessons, his friends, only now with adequate security, with the legal backing that the Thompson name provides. Are you going to get married? Michael asked, his eyes shining with a hope that broke Emma's heart. Like in the movies. Emma looked at her son, so small, so innocent, already facing more drama than any child should. Then she looked at Ryan, the man who had broken her heart years ago and who now offered a solution that was both practical and completely insane. If I accept, she began slowly, we'll have to establish rules, clear boundaries. Anything, Ryan responded immediately. And you have to promise on your son's life that this time you'll be completely honest with me about everything, your past, Adriana, the family business, the heart condition. No more secrets. Ryan nodded solemnly. You have my word. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about how her life had changed so drastically in less than 24 hours. When she opened them again, there was a new determination in her gaze. All right, she said, simply. Let's get married. Michael's smile lit up the hospital room, but it was Ryan's expression that captured Emma's attention, a complex mixture of relief, gratitude, and something else, something that seemed dangerously like hope. The wedding took place 3 days later, in a discreet ceremony at the Houston courthouse. Emma wore a simple blue dress, the same one she had worn at Michael's recital. Ryan was elegant as always in his dark suit, but there was a tension in his shoulders that betrayed the weight of the moment. Michael, still a bit pale, but recovered, enough to have been discharged, smiled radiantly in his miniature suit, holding the rings as if carrying the greatest treasure in the world. The press, of course, was in a frenzy. Thompson heir marries mother of secret son, screamed the headlines. But this time the narrative was different. Ryan had called a press conference the day before, where he exposed his version of the story with an honesty that surprised even Emma. I've made many mistakes in my life, he declared to reporters. The biggest was letting my fear and arrogance drive away the only true family I've ever had. Today, I'm trying to fix those mistakes. Not out of obligation, not from media pressure, but because my son and his mother deserve more than secrets and shadows. As for Adriana, the Thompson Empire's reaction was swift and relentless, but not in the way she expected. Instead of lawsuits or threats, Ryan did something that no one, not even Emma, anticipated. He exposed the whole truth. Yes, I helped my ex-wife get committed when she needed it most, he admitted publicly, and I will continue to help because people with mental health and chemical dependency problems deserve support, not judgment. But I will not allow her to use her own pain to hurt my son. The strategy worked. In a matter of days, the media narrative changed. Adriana, realizing she had lost control of the situation, accepted a generous settlement that included treatment at a clinic of her choice in Milan, far from Switzerland, on the condition that she never again attempt contact with the Thompson family. 6 months have passed since then. Emma and Michael remained in Houston as agreed, but now lived in a larger house in the River Oaks district with discreet security and all the structure necessary for Michael's ongoing treatment. Ryan divided his time between New York and Houston, restructuring the company to be able to work remotely more frequently. The arrangement wasn't perfect, but it worked. Emma kept her job at the publishing house, which was now undergoing a positive transformation under the Thompson Group's management. Michael continued with his piano lessons, now in a studio specially set up for him at home, and his heart was responding well to treatment. On a particular evening, Almost 7 months after the wedding, Emma found Ryan in the home office, working late as usual. She had just put Michael to bed after listening to him play a new song he was learning. He asked why you didn't play piano with him today, she said softly, leaning against the doorframe. Ryan looked up from his papers, and there was something vulnerable in his gaze. I still don't feel ready. I'm afraid of disappointing. Emma entered the office, sitting in the armchair across from his desk. You know what's funny? For years I was so afraid of you, of your power, your influence, your capacity to hurt. But now, seeing you with Michael, I realize that you're as afraid as I am. More, Ryan admitted, dropping his pen, because I know exactly how much I can lose. Again. You won't lose, Emma said softly. Not as long as you continue being honest. Not as long as you keep trying. Ryan studied her for a long moment. This arrangement, this marriage, it's not what you deserved. No, she agreed, but maybe it's what we needed. A new beginning, without romantic expectations, without pressures. Just two adults trying to do the best for their child. And if, Ryan hesitated, something rare for him. And if I wanted more? More like what? More like having dinner with you when Michael is asleep. More like really getting to know you. Not as my son's mother or my wife on paper, but as Emma, the woman who had the courage to stand up to me, to make me want to be better. Emma felt an involuntary smile form on her lips. That almost sounded like a date request, Mr. Thompson. Maybe it is, he replied, a different gleam in his eyes. What do you say? I say we need to establish some rules first. She leaned forward, keeping her gaze fixed on his. No expensive gifts, no exclusive restaurants. I want to know the Ryan behind the Thompson empire. Fair, he agreed, a genuine smile lighting up his face. How about we start now? Michael just fell asleep, and I heard you make amazing coffee. Emma stood up, extending her hand to him. Come, but first I want to show you something. She led him to the music room where the black grand piano gleamed under the soft light. Michael has been practicing a specific song. He said it's for when you finally have the courage to play with him. Ryan stopped in front of the instrument, lightly running his fingers over the keys. For Elise, he recognized the open sheet music. The first song I learned. He said he wants to play it the way you noted in the old sheet music, Emma explained. Every marking, every observation you made when you were his age. Ryan sat at the piano, his hands trembling slightly over the keys. Emma watched as he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes came out hesitantly, some wrong, but soon his fingers seemed to remember the way. The familiar melody filled the house, climbing the stairs, reaching the room where Michael slept. When the last note dissipated in the air, Emma realized she was crying. Ryan also had tears in his eyes when he turned to her. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For giving me a second chance. Not just with Michael, but with music, with life, with you. Emma approached, sitting beside him on the piano bench. You know what Michael told me today? That his heart sometimes hurts, but not in the bad way. In the good way when he's very happy. Ryan touched a key softly, the sound echoing between them. Mine too, he confessed. Emma turned to him, and for the first time since they had reunited, she allowed herself to really look at the man beside her, not the powerful Ryan Thompson, not her son's father, but simply Ryan, a man trying to fix his mistakes, trying to be better, trying to love in the right way. How about that coffee now? She suggested, standing and extending her hand again. Ryan interlaced his fingers with hers, and the simple gesture carried promises that neither was ready to verbalize yet. But there was no rush. They had time now. Time to heal, to learn, to rebuild. And most importantly, they had Michael, whose imperfect heart had taught them the most valuable of lessons, that sometimes one needs to break completely to be able to start again, stronger. From the window of the upstairs bedroom, a small smile formed on Michael's lips, who wasn't as asleep as his parents thought. He hugged his teddy bear, satisfied with